the Hispanic men back in April. And today, the FBI searched Tartaglione's property for additional bodies. The remains of the four men were recently found buried on the 178-acre plot in Titusville, New York. The U.S. Attorney says a gang...
And can you put on, my man in the other room, the video of what I look like after the Nick Tartaglione beat me up the fourth time? All right, see that? See that? And I have pictures taken by the FBI that are worth.
Today's tale takes us out of the confines of New York City and into the lower Hudson Valley region of upstate New York. It's a tale that begins with this man, Clay Tiffany. Clay Tiffany was a resident of the village of Briarcliff Manor in Westchester County, New York. He was no stranger to the people of Briarcliff, as he grew up there and ultimately became a local activist, hell-bent on exposing corruption within Westchester County and the surrounding counties of upstate New York. However, not everyone took a liking to his persona. He's a man often referred to as a gadfly. In simpler terms, he was annoying and irritating, and he would go on to use this annoyance as a tool of governmental pressure. These pressure politics often displayed behind his desk on his public TV cable access show, Dirge for the Charlatans. A show he started in the 1990s and used to expose what he believed was vast political and police corruption within upstate New York. One of his famous targets included judge and media personality Jeanine Pirro, whom he protested against and publicly heckled on a number of occasions while she was district attorney of Westchester County. He would also get into a physical altercation with Austin, New York's NAACP chapter president Jerry Smith in the year 2000. This would result in the arrest of Smith on charges of second-degree harassment and a fine for his actions against Tiffany. Furthermore, Clay Tiffany was constantly at odds with the Briarcliff Manor's Board of Education system. Tiffany would run for a school board of trustees position numerous times, failing at every try. He would accuse Briarcliff Manor's educational system of mismanaging funds, verbally abusing children, and offering lackluster instruction from teachers he felt graduated from low-tier schools. In Tiffany's mind, it was his duty to fix the local educational system, because he was a man who grew up in the area and attended Briarcliff schools. During one of his runs for school board, he would be described by the press as a cab driver who was currently writing a book about Palestinians. It would be in the late 1990s that he would attract perhaps his highest level of media attention, when he would go head-to-head with the Briarcliff Manor police and one of their officers, Nicholas Tartaglione, a man who grew up in Yonkers and entered the police force in 1993. On March 25, 1997, Officer Nicholas Tartaglione would pull over Clay Tiffany for a traffic violation. This would result in Clay Tiffany being arrested for disorderly conduct after Tartaglione accused him of becoming unruly during the stop. After this, Clay Tiffany would go to war with Tartaglione and Briarcliff police. Using the microphone on his public access cable TV show, Dirge for the Charlatans, he would continuously attack Tartaglione and claim that the town police were ripe with corruption. He would further go on to say that Tartaglione brutalized him and had a history of abuse. He would also claim that Tartaglione was being investigated by the feds because of it. At this point in Nicholas Tartaglione's police career, he was working for his 4th Police Department. In 1993, at 25 years old, he would join the Mount Vernon Police. By 1994, he would transfer to his hometown's Yonkers Police Department. That same year, he would resign from the Yonkers Police Department and join the Village of Paulding Police Department in Dutchess County, New York, where he remained until 1996. He would claim that he was forced to resign from Paulding after he and fellow officers wanted to create a union. He would file a lawsuit, which would ultimately be dismissed by a judge. He would then end up with the Village of Briarcliff Manor Police Department in Westchester County, New York. In May of 1998, Tartaglione would arrest Tiffany once more, after Tiffany claimed he stalked him in the parking lot of the Briarcliff Manor Police Station. Clay Tiffany would again complain about Tartaglione's abuse. In December of 1998, Clay Tiffany would be convicted of a disorderly conduct charge stemming from an arrest by Officer Tartaglione. He would be ordered to pay a $250 fine and spend 16 days in jail. However, he would appeal the decision and be released the following day. Nicholas Tartaglione would file a lawsuit against Clay Tiffany, claiming that Tiffany endlessly defamed him on his cable show. Tartaglione would tell news outlets, "Tiffany uses his show to fulfill a personal agenda and to express outright lies and ridiculous accusations. In my opinion, he's not all there." We would soon find out that while Clay Tiffany may not have been all there, Officer Tartaglione was certainly no gem of his own. In December of 1998, Clay Tiffany and Officer Tartaglione would have another altercation when Tiffany attended a DMV hearing in Yonkers in relation to one of Tartaglione's arrests. The two would have it out in the parking lot, which resulted in Tiffany being arrested once more. Tiffany would again file more complaints against Nicholas Tartaglione. In the end, all charges against Clay Tiffany would be dismissed after several court appearances. Tartaglione's defamation suit against Tiffany would also go nowhere. In August of 1999, Nick Tartaglione would be suspended without pay from his job as a Briarcliff police officer after being arrested for perjury and misconduct. He was accused of lying during testimony in relation to a DWI stop of a motorcyclist. He would ultimately be exonerated, but Briarcliff Manor Police chose to terminate him. He would go on to sue the department and demand his rehiring and back pay. While this drama was going on, Clay Tiffany was still not out of the picture. In October of 1999, Tiffany would be awarded $85,000 from a civil rights lawsuit against the Village of Briarcliff Manor, which stemmed from a 1994 arrest. However, his lawsuit crusade was not over yet. He would soon attempt to uncover even more police corruption and shed light on the depravity of one Nicholas Tartaglione. In the year 2000, Clay Tiffany would put Briarcliff Manor on notice, stating that he would be filing a lawsuit against them. He would say the lawsuit was a result of, quote, "a violation of my New York State and U.S. constitutional rights, malicious prosecution, assault, unnecessary use of excessive force, false arrest, obstruction of justice, false imprisonment, abuse of process, defamation, negligent infliction of emotional distress, negligence and violation of civil rights, infliction of serious physical and serious emotional harm, all caused by the negligent, reckless, and careless actions of the Village of Briarcliff Manor." End quote. The $20 million lawsuit was filed against Officer Nicholas Tartaglione, Village of Briarcliff Chief of Police Ronald Trainum, Briarcliff Mayor Keith Austin, and various other individuals and entities operating within Briarcliff Manor. The lawsuit would highlight some disturbing claims on the part of Clay Tiffany, as he would detail every run-in he ever had with Tartaglione, exposing the sheer brutality of a man who was out of control. In the first arrest, which occurred on March 25, 1997, Tiffany would say that he was unlawfully pulled over and that during the stop, Tartaglione spoke in an intimidating fashion, used racial slurs, claimed he was connected to the mafia, and physically assaulted him, which resulted in injuries to his wrist, thumbs, and hand. Furthermore, he would say he suffered emotional damage. He would claim even more physical harm occurred when he was arrested on May 16, 1998 and on December 2, 1998 by Tartaglione. But perhaps the most bizarre series of events would occur, according to Tiffany, between the dates of July 12th and July 17, 1999. On July 12th, Tiffany would say that Tartaglione would spot him in a Walmart parking lot and scream out to him, "Hey, dickhead!" at least 3 times. He attempted to report the incident, but no one would hear him out. On July 15, 1999, Clay Tiffany would say that upon exiting the Hudson River from one of his usual swims, Officer Daniel Murphy of the Briarcliff Police would approach him and say this: "One day when you're coming down to one of your swims, me and Tartaglione are going to get you." Tiffany would say that on July 17th, that exact thing would happen. Tiffany would exit the Hudson River, and Officer Nicholas Tartaglione would be there waiting. He would go on to viciously beat Tiffany, all the while screaming, "You can't continue to tell lies about me on your TV show!" Austining police would make their way to the scene and take Clay Tiffany into custody. He would be brought to the Briarcliff Manor police station, where he would be handcuffed, all the while he was in severe pain, bruised up, and bloodied. He would ultimately be taken to the hospital, where his injuries included a fractured left zygoma, fractured nasal bone, fractured left maxillary sinus, fractured ribs, lacerations, and contusions to the face, as well as associated pain. Clay Tiffany would be arraigned on crimes of assault in the 2nd degree, resisting arrest, and trespass. He would then spend 4 days in a Westchester Correctional Facility. After this beating, Clay Tiffany would speak out more on the incident on the show Dirge for the Charlatans. The YouTube channel The Legend of Clay Tiffany has provided footage of what Clay Tiffany looked like at the time and his visit to the Briarcliff Manor police station. In the footage which I'll show you now, you can first see Clay's injuries, which unfortunately I have to blur due to YouTube standards. Then, you could see imagery of the hulking figure that is Nicholas Tartaglione, surrounded by his fellow officers on the steps of the police house. His appearance made more prominent by the sheer size of him, as he was well known around the gym scene in the area and spent many years building up his physique. Over the next few years, 2 battles would be fought. Clay Tiffany would continue his legal crusade against Nicholas Tartaglione and the police and political establishment of Briarcliff Manor Village. All the while, Nicholas Tartaglione would continue to fight for his job back, plus lost wages in regard to his indefinite suspension from his 1999 perjury arrest. Tartaglione would further go on to file a $3 million civil rights lawsuit against officials of the village of Briarcliff Manor, the chief of police Ronald Trainum, 2 officers who arrested him, District Attorney Janine Pirro, and Michael Hughes, who was the chief of the District Attorney's Public Integrity Bureau. Unfortunately for Tartaglione, his lawsuit would be dismissed in the spring of 2002. He would still continue to fight for his reinstatement, a battle he would win in 2003, when he successfully sued Briarcliff Manor Police for wrongful termination. He would be reinstated back into the force and receive $320,000 in back pay. But before year's end, Nicholas Tartaglione would be hit with more trouble. In that same year of 2003, Clay Tiffany would successfully sue Nicholas Tartaglione for $200,000, stemming from his claims of brutality in the multiple run-ins they had from 1997 to 1999. Furthermore, in October of 2003, just a few months after his reinstatement to the force, he would suffer a bad elbow injury stemming from an automobile which struck him. His future with the force would again be on the line. In September of 2004, Clay Tiffany would receive another settlement. He would receive $900,000 from Briarcliff Manor Village in relation to his $20 million lawsuit filed in the year 2000. Tiffany would still continue to cause a ruckus over his payments, particularly the payment he received from Tartaglione. It would turn out that both settlements Clay Tiffany received came from insurance claims. He was hoping that Tartaglione would personally be liable for the $200,000 he received from the suit against him. There was nothing he can do about it. But in usual Clay Tiffany fashion, he had to at least complain. The 7-year-long episode, which started with Officer Tartaglione pulling over Clay Tiffany in March of '97, was finally over. Clay got over $1 million combined in 2 settlements, and Officer Nicholas Tartaglione got what he felt was coming to him. However, he would have a long road ahead of him if he wanted to be a cop again. Upon his injury in October of 2003, he would go out on workers' compensation, where he stayed until 2008, when he was finally able to retire with a disability pension. In 2010, Tartaglione would try once more to get on the police force. He would receive a medical examination, which resulted in the Comptroller's Medical Board granting him the okay to return to the force. He would be placed at the top of the list for Briarcliff Manor. However, they would not make any new hires. Tartaglione would then try to get a job with the Mount Vernon Police, but was also unsuccessful. he would ultimately have the disability pension restored, despite his numerous complaints that he was being unfairly treated and more than fit to work. Perhaps Nicholas Tartaglione wasn't being honest with himself. In the past 10 years, he more than proved that he was a serious liability. Seems like everyone realized it, but him. He would have no choice but to continue to stay out on disability. As mentioned earlier, Tartaglione was known around the local gym scene as a hulking figure during his time on the force. He would continue that reputation post-police career. I'll revert back to Clay Tiffany's footage and show you his physical stature once more. You can clearly see his massive upper body and huge biceps refusing to be hidden by his button-up shirt, his size far outweighing that of his police counterparts. It's reported that sometime in the early 2000s, Nicholas Tartaglione would come up with a new way to supplement his income while hoping to return to work. That supplementation coming from his peddling of steroids and other illegal PEDs to local individuals in the gym scene who were looking to bulk up. And while I'm sure Nicholas Tartaglione was gifted with superior physical genetics, just looking at him, one could also assume that his appearance was also aided by performance-enhancing drugs like anabolic steroids, that same medicine he was dishing out for profit. If so, it could also offer an explanation for his violent fits of rage. One of his early customers in this business was a man by the name of Joseph Biggs, another hulking individual who called upstate New York his home. In 2006, Joseph Biggs would meet Tartaglione in the Rockland County, New York bodybuilding scene. He would start purchasing steroids from him and forming a friendship. Biggs was the product of a terrible upbringing. He would say that he was abused by a football coach at just 14 years old, and by that age was already involved in heavy drug use. He would spend most of his 20s doing armed robberies and committing numerous burglaries in order to support his habit. But by his late 20s, he became a father and began cleaning up his life, eventually becoming a man of massive proportions through bodybuilding and his PED use. There was also Gerard Benderoth, aka the White Rhino, or the Mutant White Rhino. He would also form a relationship with Nicholas Tartaglione. Gerard Benderoth served as an NYPD officer out of the Bronx 44th Precinct for 10 years before leaving in 2004. He would then pursue a career with the Haverstraw Police Department in Rockland County, New York, where he would retire in 2015. As an NYPD officer, he would spend months as a 9/11 responder, helping with the rescue and recovery of numerous victims after the World Trade Center attacks. He was also a well-known strongman competitor and former boxer who stood 5'11" and at times weighed close to 400 pounds. In 1995, he was a finalist in the Super Heavyweight Golden Gloves and a gold medalist in the 1995 Empire State Games. At one time, he would be ranked in the top 10 of all strongman competitors in the United States. Outside of all those accolades, he was also a family man and a well-liked individual throughout the police force and the strongman and bodybuilding world. It would be around 2013 that Joseph Biggs and Gerard Benderoth would start working directly for Tartaglione. Their job? Collecting debts for Tartaglione. At that time, Tartaglione was still peddling illegal PEDs to numerous individuals in upstate's Rockland County and the surrounding county's bodybuilding scene. If any of these individuals tried avoiding payment to Tartaglione, it would be Biggs and Benderoth's job to collect. Joseph Biggs would say that they would stalk these individuals in gym parking lots and corner them. If they didn't have the money on them, they would take the individual to wherever they needed to go to get the funds. The sight of these two massive individuals, ready to squash you into the pavement, was enough to put a chill down anyone's spine, regardless of how strong one may be. You didn't want to have it out with them. In time, Nicholas Tartaglione would take the next step in the peddling of illicit substances and start looking into new ways to make money. In 2015, Tartaglione was living on a large farm property at 419 Old Mountain Road in Otisville, New York, where he was also running an animal sanctuary for horses and dogs. This business no stranger to him, as his family had been involved in the animal field for many years in upstate New York. He was still peddling steroids, but would also begin to grow marijuana on the property, with the hopes of getting into that business. He would employ a man by the name of Marcos Cruz as a farmhand, helping him out on the vast 178-acre farm. In June of 2015, Marcos Cruz would introduce two individuals to Nicholas Tartaglione, who would help him with a new business venture. There was Jason Sullivan, an Orange County, New York native and owner of L&J Construction, who coincidentally was another gym rat, chock full of roids. He would visit the farm with Martin Luna, a man he employed for a decade in his construction business, and a man who was a friend of farmhand Marcos Cruz. During the visit, Sullivan and Tartaglione obviously hit it off. Sullivan would tell Tartaglione that his marijuana grow was not good because he was mixing female and male plants, thus being why his yield was terrible. Tartaglione would express his interest in furthering his operation and was open to ideas. Martin Luna suggested cocaine, and he would tell him that he had out-of-state connects in Texas and Florida. Tartaglione obliged, and the plan would be set into motion. In December of 2015, Tartaglione would go on to invest $200,000 into the cocaine trade with Martin Luna, the man introduced to him by his farmhand Marcos Cruz. The plan would be for money to be driven into Texas, where the narcotics would be picked up by Luna and driven back to Florida in order to sell them there. Jason Sullivan, owner of L&J Construction and Martin Luna's employer, would move down to Florida in late 2015 and leave Luna to handle construction duties in New York. It would be at Jason Sullivan's Florida home that the drugs would be kept while they were being sold on the streets of Florida. For the first drive into Texas, Nicholas Tartaglione's brother Michael would handle the duties. He would drive into Houston with the money, where Luna would acquire the drugs, which would then be brought back to Florida, stored at Jason Sullivan's house, and sold on the streets of Florida by his niece's husband, Urbano Santiago. The first run went well, and around $50,000 was made from the sales. Martin Luna would then take over $200,000 back to Texas in order to pick up more drugs, transport them back to Florida, and further Tartaglione's operation. This is when things would go sour. After Luna arrived in Texas on January 17, 2016, he would call Marcos Cruz and tell him that he believed he was ripped off. He would say to tell Nicholas Tartaglione that he gave the suppliers the money, but he received nothing in return. Tartaglione would go into a rage. He invested his life savings into this operation, and he refused to be crossed. To get to the bottom of things, Tartaglione would enlist one of his trusted enforcers to confront Martin Luna, that enforcer being Joseph Biggs. At that time, Joseph Biggs was living in Nanuet in Rockland County, New York, and was employed as a security guard for the Greenberg-Graham School District in Hastings-on-Hudson. Joseph Biggs would locate farmhand Marcos Cruz and confront him about Luna and the missing funds. They would then meet Luna, who would take Cruz and Biggs to an upstate trailer park, where Luna claimed the relatives of the so-called thieves lived. That lead turned up nothing. Joseph Biggs would tell Luna, "Listen, if you don't come up with this money, there's going to be blood on your hands." At first, Tartaglione wanted to believe Luna, but in time, Luna would disappear. Tartaglione would send Joseph Biggs and the hulking strongman Gerard Benderoth to investigate any leads on Luna. It was back to business again for these two henchmen, but this time, it wasn't the usual job of cornering some delinquent gym rat in a parking lot. The stakes were far higher. Ultimately, they could not track down Luna. It was now April of 2016, and Tartaglione was still out over $200,000. He would then come up with a new plan to lure Martin Luna to a meeting. He would contact Luna's construction boss, Jason Sullivan, down in Florida. He would tell Sullivan of the latest drama and asked him to track Luna down. Sullivan seemed sympathetic to the situation and wanted to help. After all, it was Sullivan's house in Florida where the drugs were being stashed for the operation, and he himself reaped some of the benefits from the sales. Sullivan would ask Tartaglione, "Nick, what's going to happen to Luna if he doesn't come up with the money?" Tartaglione would reply, "He would be gone." Despite what he just heard, Sullivan would still go on to aid Tartaglione in meeting with Luna. Luna would be tracked down to Mexico, where he arrived sometime in March of 2016. Martin Luna was told by Sullivan that he had 3 construction jobs lined up in upstate New York, and that he needed him to evaluate the jobs when he returned to New York. Luna would return to New York on April 10th of 2016, and on the 11th, he would make plans to visit the sites of the supposed construction gigs. Sullivan would use a burner phone and speak to Joseph Biggs, who would tell him to report to Luna and advise him to meet at the Liquid Lounge Bar, located in a shopping center at 69 Brookside Avenue in Chester, New York. This bar was owned by Nicholas Tartaglione's brother Michael. At the bar waiting would be Joseph Biggs and Gerard Benderoth. 41-year-old Martin Luna would head over, but he wouldn't be alone. With him were his niece's husband, 32-year-old Urbano Santiago, his nephew, 25-year-old Miguel Luna, and family friend, 32-year-old Hector Gutierrez. Martin Luna proceeds to knock on the bar door. Strongman Gerard Benderoth opens up and ushers the men inside. Joseph Biggs then appears. Luna races for an emergency exit, but the door is blocked. Gerard Benderoth produces a gun and instructs all men to get on the floor. Benderoth proceeds to kneel down on Martin Luna's back, his wide 300-plus pound frame crushing down on Luna. Biggs would duct tape the 3 remaining men's hands and bring them into an office room. Martin Luna would be put in a chair and wheeled into the bathroom. In time, Nicholas Tartaglione would arrive. He would reach out to Jason Sullivan and explain to him that he had Luna at the bar. Jason Sullivan would hear screaming from Tartaglione, "Sit down and shut the fuck up! Where's my money?" After some mumbling, the line went quiet. Nicholas Tartaglione would proceed to beat Martin Luna while continually questioning him about the lost funds. When that didn't work, Tartaglione would produce a zip tie and place it around Martin Luna's neck. As the tie grew tighter, Luna grasped for air until his body gave out. The Grim Reaper, Nicholas Tartaglione, had taken all life out of him. He would drag his bloodied, lifeless body out of the room and race to his car to retrieve a tarp. Tartaglione would then reach out to his farmhand Marcos Cruz and tell him to come to the bar. He would witness Luna wrapped up in a tarp and the 3 other men restrained in the bathroom. Tartaglione and Biggs would carry Martin Luna's body to the car, and Tartaglione would drive him to his farm on Old Mountain Road. Benderoth and Biggs would arrive at the farm with the 3 remaining men. All 3 men would be placed on the ground, still duct taped. Biggs would receive a gun from Benderoth and take aim. He would then turn away from the horror and hear 2 more shots. When he turned back, both Benderoth and Tartaglione had guns in their hands. In his mind, all 3 of them had blood on their hands. A large hole would be dug on the farm, and all men would be placed in it and covered up with soil. Nicholas Tartaglione spent years brutalizing people and walking a thin line between public servant and public nuisance. It all culminated in this very moment. Later that night, they would meet back up with Marcos Cruz and attempt to locate Luna's car, but had no luck. The following day, Marcos Cruz would return to the farm and assist Tartaglione in adding more topsoil to the burial site and dispose of any evidence. Within a week, newspaper outlets were reporting that authorities were looking for 4 men reported missing. Martin Luna, Urbano Santiago, Miguel Luna, and Hector Gutierrez were last seen in the 2010 Chevy Equinox, the same Equinox found by police on Monday, April 18th, in the Orange County, New York village of Chester. The case would go cold, but police kept pursuing leads. It would be in August of 2016 that Nicholas Tartaglione would reach out to the Journal News, which services the lower Hudson County area of New York. He would tell a journalist that he was readying a lawsuit against the village of Briarcliff Manor, stating that they are keeping officers like him who are healthy, unemployed. It would turn out that Tartaglione had been in contact with a reporter from the Journal News since November of 2015, complaining about how healthy he was and that he was running an animal sanctuary, going to the gym often, and practicing martial arts. He wanted reporters to pick up his story and help him expose what he felt was a corrupt infrastructure that was stealing taxpayers' money to pay people like him to stay home. Somewhere in the back of Nicholas Tartaglione's convoluted mind, he still believed he was going to be a cop, even after beginning a large drug operation and committing a quadruple homicide. In September of 2016, Nicholas Tartaglione would purchase a new home at 103 Long Lane in Crawford, New York for $450,000. He would continue his horse and dog rescue operation on the new land. He didn't know it yet, but he was facing down his final days of freedom. Police continued to investigate the disappearance of the 4 men who left home on April 11th and never returned. Ultimately, The FBI would get involved. Their biggest discoveries would come when they got a hold of Marcos Cruz, the former farmhand of Nicholas Tartaglione, and the friend of one of the missing men, Martin Luna. He would start to cooperate in the investigation. Jason Sullivan, Martin Luna's former construction boss, and man whose Florida home was used to stash the drugs being sold for the operation, would also start cooperating. Federal authorities would begin working on the information being told to them and compiling cell phone location data on those involved. On the morning of Monday, December 19th, 2016, Sullivan would make a call to Tartaglione and explain to him that authorities just visited his home and questioned him about the 4 missing men. Tartaglione would coach him on what to say if they visited again. Tartaglione didn't know it, but this call was a controlled one, and the feds were listening in. That same morning, a woman identified as Varag Ballant, who was reportedly married to Nicholas Tartaglione, would exit the driveway in her Jeep and soon be pulled over by investigators at the intersection of Long Lane and New York 17K. While questioning her at the intersection, Nicholas Tartaglione would arrive. Police would tell Tartaglione that the stop was in reference to a road rage incident. Obviously, this was a ruse. They would ask Tartaglione to come down to the station and start patting him down when he received another call from Sullivan, but quickly hung up. He would say out loud in front of officers, "Sullivan just called me about those missing Mexicans." Although Tartaglione wasn't under arrest at this point, he agreed to go down to the station. During transport, he would ask officers, "Is this about those missing Mexicans?" At the station, they would ask him about Martin Luna and the other missing individuals and anything he knew about a drug operation. They would continue pressing him until they had the okay to arrest him. Tartaglione would finally ask for a lawyer, and that's what they would advise Tartaglione, that he was under arrest and was under federal indictment by New York State's Southern District. He would be brought to a White Plains, New York court and arraigned. The United States vs. Nicholas Tartaglione would be a 5-count indictment where authorities implicated Tartaglione in a drug conspiracy and 4 homicides. On Tuesday, December 20th, with intel from farmhand Marcos Cruz and Jason Sullivan, federal authorities would arrive to Tartaglione's former property at 419 Old Mountain Road in Otisville. It would be there on that day that they would dig up the remains of 41-year-old Martin Luna, 32-year-old Urbano Santiago, 25-year-old Miguel Luna, and 32-year-old Hector Gutierrez. From there, another warrant would be served at his new residence at 103 Long Lane, as police looked for more clues implicating Tartaglione, including a backhoe which Marcos Cruz claimed was used to fill in the burial site. 49-year-old Nicholas Tartaglione would be remanded in federal custody, while federal authorities continued to build their case. The next men on their list were 55-year-old Joseph Biggs and 48-year-old Gerard Benderoth. Wednesday, March 8th, 2017. Federal agents and a local task force are tailing 48-year-old Gerard Benderoth of Stony Point, New York. He's driving a black Chevy Suburban down Rosman Road in the Teal section of Haverstraw, New York, Rockland County. As he approaches Lancashire Court, authorities unleash their police siren, and Benderoth comes to a stop. As federal agents approach the Suburban, a shot rings out. Benderoth would be found unconscious inside his truck. He would take his own life. The news hit big in New York. A well-respected former police officer, only a couple of years removed from retirement, was under federal watch, and instead of facing the music, he decided to go out on his own terms. The press would not be notified as to why the feds were onto him, only saying that it's an ongoing investigation. However, within a few hours, the real reason for the stop would leak, and news would report that the federal authorities were connecting Benderoth to Tartaglione. His community of friends and family were obviously devastated. One friend would describe him as a legend in the strange sports world, and a highly respected and adored man. He would further say that Benderoth spent years dealing with depression from his time spent at Ground Zero after the attacks on 9/11. It would also come out that he recently defaulted on his $350,000 home mortgage and was close to losing it. This depression and money issues could possibly explain Benderoth's willingness to work for Tartaglione over the past few years, doing despicable acts like roughing people up for money, and committing the ultimate sin of taking one's life. With Benderoth out of the picture, Joseph Biggs was up next. Biggs would be arrested on June 1st, 2017, in the town of Hastings on Hudson. The government would produce a superseding indictment: the United States of America versus Nicholas Tartaglione and Joseph Biggs. This indictment included the original 5-count indictment against Tartaglione, and also added 12 more counts, which included weapons charges and kidnapping, bringing the total to 17 counts. Both men would be held in federal custody. Nicholas Tartaglione would be sent to the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Lower Manhattan, a facility that's held some of America's most infamous criminals. Fraudsters like Bernie Madoff, gangsters like John Gotti and Sammy the Bull Gravano, and terrorists like Ramzi Youssef have all called MCC home at one point. He would be held in a special housing unit before being transferred to the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn in the spring of 2017. It would be in MDC in Brooklyn that he would be cited for 2 violations. First, he would get in trouble for writing an email to a former inmate's wife, which resulted in a loss of commissary privileges for 6 months. He would then accept commissary from a fellow inmate, which got him another violation. This violation resulted in a 3-month loss of visitor, email, and phone privileges. By January of 2018, he was back at MCC in Manhattan, inside a special housing facility where he'd be relegated to a small prison cell. This area most commonly referred to as the Hole. In February of 2018, Nicholas Tartaglione would need medical treatment after being attacked in MCC. He would spend 2 weeks in a hospital bed after receiving reconstructive surgery for a fractured eye socket bone. Tartaglione's lawyer, Bruce Barkett, would continually complain about the conditions in MCC, stating that his client stares at 4 walls all day and that his mental health was in decline. Furthermore, he would say that the conditions made it impossible to meet with his client and properly fight his case. For those of you unaware of MCC's reputation, this setting and issues are not an uncommon complaint from inmates and those representing high-profile inmates housed there. In the meantime, Tartaglione would have no choice but to sit in his own hell. On top of that, he, along with Joseph Biggs, were waiting to see if prosecutors would seek the death penalty against them. Tartaglione would find out in March of 2019 that the Attorney General, William Barr, would in fact seek the penalty of death against him. Tartaglione's lawyer, Bruce Burkett, would say this in regard to the decision:
Fortunate, despicable, unnecessary, unjust, egregious, thoughtless, pointless. Those are all words that came to my mind.
Tartaglione took the news as well as he could. He was more concerned about how long this process was going to play out. Up until this point, Nicholas Tartaglione's life was already a movie. He was the muscle-bound, steroid-using, disgraced former police officer who brutalized those he arrested, which led to a series of lawsuits. He would then become a steroid dealer who employed henchmen to collect his profits, until realizing he could reap more benefits, stepping up his game in the illicit drug world, only to find out he had been ripped off, and the only answer to his problems was going back to being the brutalizer he always was, and taking the lives of 4 men. Despite all this, he ran an animal sanctuary, caring for horses and dogs. Quite possibly the only living beings on Earth he was capable of feeling sympathy for. He was now sitting in one of the most secure, high-profile prisons in the world, with the Grim Reaper waiting patiently for the call. However, things were about to get a lot stranger for Tartaglione. His bizarre tale was not over yet. Saturday, July 6th, 2019. 66-year-old wealthy financier Jeffrey Epstein is taken into custody and hit with a federal indictment alleging the trafficking of minors over multiple years. Epstein was already a convicted offender with long-time reputed links to international intelligence agencies and many wealthy businessmen and politicians around the globe. His case would ultimately turn into one of the most high-profile cases in American history, ripe with conspiracies and worldwide concern over who exactly this man was and what was the truth behind his finances and the power he accumulated over the past 30-plus years. He would soon enter the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan and greet his new cellmate, a frightening 51-year-old musclehead accused of quadruple homicide, the infamous Nicholas Tartaglione. The two would have to share a cell, surely prompting both of them to question, how the fuck did I end up in a cell with this lowlife? The ragtag seemingly got along, at least according to Nicholas Tartaglione and his lawyer Bruce Barkett, but things would get strange within a couple of weeks of them being together. Tuesday, July 23rd, 2019. Correction officers arrived to Tartaglione in Epstein's cell after Tartaglione said he found Epstein unconscious on the floor with bruises on his neck. He would say that he attempted to help Epstein and that Epstein tried to take himself out. The news was huge, and the Epstein conspiracies continued to grow. Was Tartaglione intentionally put with Epstein because authorities knew he would hurt him? Was it an inside job? Or did Epstein actually try to inflict this pain upon himself in order to escape prosecution? We may never know for sure, but in the end, Tartaglione would be cleared of any wrongdoing, and he and his lawyer would stand by their story. Epstein would be separated from Tartaglione and placed on psychological observation so that authorities could watch him and make sure he wouldn't hurt himself. He would be placed with an unknown inmate who would be transferred out of MCC on August 9th, leaving Jeffrey Epstein alone. This was against policy, and by the next morning, Jeffrey Epstein would be found dead in his cell. From what we're told, was a self-inflicted act. Furthermore, it would be discovered that the guards failed to do their necessary checkups on his cell that night, meaning he was left alone and unattended for many hours. Nicholas Tartaglione would speak to the Daily News the following month and say this: "As far as Jeff Epstein is concerned, I never touched the man. I despise anyone who hurts children, but whatever was going to happen to him, I was not going to be a part of it. The prison told Epstein they were putting him in the cell with me because they knew I would neither hurt nor extort him. The staff here at MCC had hundreds of inmates to choose from, yet I was their first choice." Now, as far as the official narrative goes as to what occurred in that cell to cause Epstein's death, well, I'll leave that up to you to decide, as it's far too deep of a rabbit hole to go down at this moment. But the last tidbit I'll offer you is this. Later on, long after Jeffrey Epstein's death, David Schoen, a lawyer who met with Epstein after the initial incident in MCC, would say that Epstein told him that Tartaglione did in fact inflict the injuries to his neck, and that it was all a part of some experiment or prank that Tartaglione was doing. Tartaglione would place a makeshift rope around Jeffrey's neck and pull it tightly, which left the bruising. Epstein would tell Schoen that he didn't want to speak up about the incident because he feared that he would receive backlash and be perceived as a rat. Tartaglione would remain in MCC, where he kept complaining about his treatment inside. His lawyer, Bruce Barkett, would continually make it publicly known that the holding facility was a hellhole, and Tartaglione should be moved to a new facility immediately. This, coupled with the Epstein incident, made life even harder for Tartaglione, as he said he was being targeted and harassed by staff who were retaliating against him, even barring him from taking showers for days on end. In August of 2019, Tartaglione would find out that he was going to be the only one to face the most serious time if convicted. It would turn out that Joseph Biggs, the murdering meathead who was once a trusted enforcer of Tartaglione's, was now a cooperating witness. Much like Marcos Cruz and Jason Sullivan, he was hoping for a sweet deal because he knew he was dead to rights. In December of 2022, federal prosecutors would inform the courts that they were no longer seeking the death penalty in U.S. v. Nicholas Tartaglione. Nicholas was no longer fighting for his life, but life in prison was still on the table. After being held in federal custody for over 6 years, Nicholas Tartaglione's trial would finally get underway. Jury selection would occur on March 13th of 2023, and the trial would begin on March the 17th, inside White Plains Federal Court. The United States of America versus Nicholas Tartaglione, presided over by federal judge Kenneth Karras. Tartaglione's lawyer, Bruce Barkett, would contend that he was the fall guy for this whole thing. He would say they had nothing to do with the drug conspiracy, or any homicides. Furthermore, the government was colluding with cooperating witnesses in order to frame Nicholas Tartaglione. He would go on to say that Joseph Biggs was the one responsible for the deaths, and that he had a reputation of getting enjoyment out of strangling people. This defense was seemingly all Barkett had. It was almost as if he was representing a mob boss. My client never does anything wrong. He's being framed. It's everyone else's fault. The first cooperating witness would be Jason Sullivan, owner of L&J Construction and former boss of Martin Luna, his Florida home used as a stash house for the drug operation. He would detail how he met Tartaglione at his home with Martin Luna and how the drug operation was born. Furthermore, he would admit to aiding in the setup of Luna when he told him to meet for a job at the Liquid Lounge, ultimately costing the lives of 4 men. He was hoping the jurors bought it and the prosecution would spare him. Next up was Nicholas Tartaglione's former farmhand, Marcos Cruz. He testified to introducing Luna to Tartaglione and helping facilitate the drug operation. Furthermore, he testified to witnessing Luna's body being carried out of the Liquid Lounge, and he would also testify to helping fill in the burial site at the farm on Old Mountain Road the following day. Another man hoping to get a lighter sentence for his cooperation. And finally, the star cooperating witness, Joseph Biggs. He would speak about how he met Tartaglione in the early 2000s through his buying of steroids and being around the gym scene in the Hudson Valley region of New York, eventually becoming one of his henchmen, responsible for collecting his debts alongside Gerard Benderoth. He would go into the details of the fallout, which resulted from Tartaglione losing over $200,000 in a drug deal, and how he took part in the brutal massacre of 41-year-old Martin Luna, 32-year-old Urbano Santiago, 25-year-old Miguel Luna, and 32-year-old Hector Gutierrez. He would also speak candidly about his terrible childhood, filled with physical abuse and a long history of drug use. Perhaps the most bizarre thing Biggs would admit to is that he had sexual encounters with Gerard Benderoth. Biggs would claim that Benderoth came onto him after inviting him over and forced him into having an affair with him. He would go on to say that the two hooked up on a few more occasions after that. Federal prosecutors would also produce the cell phone data records that showed the individuals' locations the night the crime took place, which to them further solidified cooperator testimony. They would also produce DNA from a blood sample taken from the Liquid Lounge bar, which matched Martin Luna's. Nicholas Tartaglione and his defense team were no match, and on Thursday, April 6, 2023, Nicholas Tartaglione would be convicted. He would be found guilty of the drug conspiracy and the kidnapping and murder of Martin Luna, Miguel Luna, Urbano Santiago, and Hector Gutierrez in furtherance of the conspiracy. Jason Sullivan would receive 10 years in federal prison for his cooperation, a cooperation which prosecutors refer to as extraordinary. He sits at FCI Coleman and is scheduled for release in 2025. He has already served over 8 years. Marcos Cruz would be sentenced to time served for his cooperation after being incarcerated for over 7 years. He was free to go. Joseph Biggs, the man who took part in the actual homicides and shed light on the intricate lifestyle of Tartaglione, dating back to the early 2000s, would receive a sentence of 16 years and 8 months in federal prison, including the time he already spent incarcerated. He sits in USP Allenwood and is scheduled for release in 2031. While awaiting sentencing, Tartaglione would speak to News 12 New York and say this:
"The truth will come out. If the jury was able to see what we had, I'd be home right now. I'm a cop in prison for crimes I didn't do. I was running an animal rescue organization. That's who I am. The only involvement I had in this was Marcos and Martin asked me if I knew anybody that could help them find somebody that stole money. I said, yeah, here's this guy. And I gave him Benderoth's number, and I gave him Biggs' number."
He would also go on to say that his defense team did an insufficient job, and that Bruce Barkett didn't show the best evidence they had. Furthermore, he would claim that the government altered video evidence. He was going to continue to hold on to the idea that he was framed and seek a new defense team. He would request a new trial in early June, but federal judge Kenneth M. Karras would turn down that request. And on Monday, June 10th, 2024, Nicholas Tartaglione would learn his fate. Judge Karras would hand Tartaglione 4 consecutive life sentences in a federal prison. It was all over for Nick. His last 30 years of freedom became what I can only describe as one of the most bizarre criminal biographies in American history. He would now enter a new chapter And while it wasn't the first hole Nicholas Tartaglione dug, it would certainly be the last. Today, he is 56 years old and currently sits at USP Atwater in California. In closing, let's revisit our old pal Clay Tiffany. You may have noticed that his brilliant commentary was missing from Tartaglione's 7+ year incarceration while awaiting for trial. Clay Tiffany would pass away in his home in March of 2015. He would be discovered in his home on the 26th of March, but it's reported that he may have passed away many days before that. Clay Tiffany would never live to see Tartaglione be exposed for being the brutal man he always was, and the brutal man he always knew he was. His voice and presence surely missed during the whole saga. May his wild, strange spirit live on. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this story. If you enjoyed this content, please leave a like, a comment, and make sure to subscribe to NYC Crime Spot.